Hello, people that watch. Today I wanted to go over comp team improvement and review. So we've covered a lot of stuff like com success, IGL success, R6 team, like comp success, and then finding and fixing team issues, understanding, like analyzing an attack, understanding attacks. So we've talked a lot about this stuff, but like how do we? One of the biggest issues that I find working with teams is like they will understand what you're talking about, but then they have trouble translating it to the game. So like, how do we talk about these things, understand them when we talk about them, but then move them to the game? So there's a couple things that like I want to go through here that we can talk about that might help that. So just starting off, like just some quotes to. So when we and this is going to go into the first part here is like expectations when we come to practice, attitude, motivation, mentality, daily and weekly goals, comms, drills, creating good habits, individual/team. So then when we look at these quotes, the great Leonidas, give them nothing but take from them everything. I don't know if I could play this on here, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Hold! Give them nothing but take from them everything. Hold!
Right, so when I play that clip and we talk about this quote, my idea, as like just based on who I am, is when we come to practice and we go into a scrim, that's our attitude, right? We come in here, we're coming to dominate. Like, we're not here to win, but we're here to learn and become better, right? So when we go in there, our whole idea is to fix mistakes, try new things, learn from them, and then when we get to game day, we can have that attitude of like, we've practiced, we've talked about stuff, we've reviewed stuff, we've done drills, like all these things, so that when the important games come, we can play at our highest, capabilities, right? So to do that, we have to have like good expectations and attitudes in practice. So that's why we're going over these quotes. Dwayne Johnson, The Rock. Success isn't always about greatness. It's about consistency. Consistent hard work leads to success, which is everything we've talked about in these things. We've talked a lot about being consistent. We have these lists on how, like, what types of things we should be looking for, how we should be improving, like all this stuff. So when we come to practice, we need to create good habits, individual and team. We need to like go through reviews, talk about stuff, all that good stuff. So next one is, I believe, Ariana Huffington. We think mistakenly that success is the result of the amount of time we put in at work instead of the quality of time we put in. So when we think about that, what we've talked about in previous videos is that lots of teams will spend all their time scrimming and they never do anything else. They barely dry run. They never do VOD reviews. They never do any review. They don't do right here on the schedule what I call AAR, after action reviews. We get these people who come into scrims. You lose the scrim and they just like dip out of the Discord immediately, angry, right? Why did we lose the scrim? This is the best time to talk about it. There's no point in being angry or emotional about it. It's a learning experience. I don't know where people get this attitude of you go into a scrim and you got to win this scrim. That's not what the point of the scrims are, right? The point of the scrims are to learn everything possible that we can, be exposed to as many different like uncomfortable situations as possible, find the holes in our strat, learn mentalities of other teams and patterns of other teams on attacks, which is one of the things that we talked about in the understanding attacks video. Is in all sites, there's a couple different ways to attack the site, and once you understand how they're going to attack it as a defender, it becomes, now you can get into the counter game of countering what they're doing, and as an attacker, if you have a basic plan going in, then you're going to be more successful, right? You can make adaptations as you go if you need to, but again, that's what that experience and exposure is in scrims, is you're facing these things, and how do you problem solve it? And then let's, for example, say you come in Monday, you deal with an issue, you come in Tuesday, you review it, scrim the map again, and see if you can find the solutions to those issues, like when you talk about it in your review, right? Talk about it in your review, go over, and then translate it to the game. What kind of solutions you had in the game, right? So this is all important stuff. Like, that's why we've got these quotes here. When you come into practice, that's the expectations part. Attitude isn't just about what's in the game, how people are acting in the game, but how they view practice in general. Motivation, when we show up to practice, this is where that consistency thing comes into place. Is when we come into practice, we can't just be coming into practice like, giving it half-ass just because it's a scrim and it's not a real game, right? Again, when we get to those important games that we do want to win, then we need to be able to perform at our highest level. And to do that, we have to come into practice motivated, with good attitudes, treating practice serious, right? You can't just come in fucking around in practice, doing whatever you want to do and not improving, right? Every practice is a lesson. Every practice is important. It's all, and like we talked about right here, you can go and scrim 100 scrims and not learn very much. But if you go about things this way with a structure and review and actively try to become better and come to practices with the intent of becoming better, then you're going to start talking about the quality of your time, right? Daily and weekly goals. So this is where we can get into the review portion, right? We review either last week or the previous day's scrim, and that's how we can get into these daily and weekly goals. So like something that I went over recently, this is just some notes that I took from a scrim, but and this is where we talked about an understanding attacks, is thinking moves ahead. What is our end game? How did we get there? What are the phases of attack? What should be happening in those phases? And that's also going into creating good habits, right? Timestamps. When do we want to accomplish these things in our basic plan, right? Like, if we get to a certain point, we want to finish this certain point by a specific time. That way we can start working on the other thing, because we're always trying to obviously plant, right? So we need to plant in a reasonable amount of time, especially when we think about smokes on the board or something that can delay you in any way, right? You have to be able to get to that point, deal with that stuff in order, like in a reasonable amount of time, right? Mid and late round intel and IGLing, possibly blank. So this would be like a player assignment, right? Like, we have a good early round IGL, but maybe the plant is happening on the opposite side. Like if we're doing a pinch here and we're trying to plant wherever, you know what I mean? Maybe we got the active or the real IGL or early round IGL is over here, and the guy who's going to plant is over in construction. Maybe at this point in the mid and late round, since this guy over in construction is the one planting, maybe he's the one who directs the players on what he needs to happen so that he can plant wherever in around the bunk here, right? What needs to happen? He's like front lines, getting ready to plant. What does he need the other players to do, right? That's where we get that mid and late round IGLing. Who is it going to be? You have to come to these conclusions, talk about these things as a team. Finding openings and capitalizing on them, that's right up there with getting mid and late round intel with your drones. That's one of the biggest problems I see with teams, is mid and late round droning and getting intel so they can find those openings and capitalize on them, whether it's getting picks, whether it's taking territory, whether it's getting the plant off. You have to have that mid and late round droning, and that's something that is not talked about often, so we got to figure that out. Who's going to be doing it? Or in the round, say we're at 1:30, that's one of our timestamps. 1:30 in the round, we got to start getting mid-round intel. Who has a drone? Who's able to get that, right? That's where we can activate those timestamps. We have to think about that stuff. And this stuff we have to talk about as a team in our reviews. That way, when we go into the scrim, it's active in our minds, and we can actively try to engage it while we're in the scrim. It's fresh. We need a hype person or persons for good rounds, big plays. Maybe you get a flawless round. Why are we not like going crazy on the comms about it, right? It's a big deal. We want that mentality of success. We want everybody to be hyped up and in good spirits. So it's important to have a hype person or persons when an individual makes a good play or the team has a good round overall. It's going to make us play more consistent. Again, we should try to keep our emotions under control, not getting angry, not raging, not being toxic, not blaming. When things go wrong, what went wrong? How do we fix it, right? So an example of that I've heard recently is we're playing a little sloppy, right? I heard that someone say that in a VOD that I watched recently, and I think to myself, that's half of the answer, right? We are playing sloppy. That's good stuff to add, but what specifically are we playing in terms of sloppiness, right? Um, is it droning? Are we stalling out on attack? Flank watch? Communication? What specifically, right? If it's droning, um, like we talked about in mid and late round droning, who is droning what? Does somebody need to have that timestamp in their mind of like, hey, at 1:30, that's mid round. We need to have this specific amount of territory by then, and then we want to be droning wherever so that we can move on to the next. You know what I mean? Like, we have to fix these problems. So when we recognize in the game that we are playing sloppy, what is it specifically? You know what I mean? You have to be able to talk about that in the game real quick, and that's the problem as well, is people don't have a lot of time to talk about this stuff in game. That's why your op phase and your prep phase are so important, because you can. I always hear teams talking about a play that they made or how they got swung by this or just bullshit, right? Nothing important. In your op phase and your prep phase, it's the most important time for your team, because either A, you can be making adaptations based on what happened in the previous round, or if we're talking about we're playing a little sloppy now, what specifically are we doing sloppy? Is our droning being sloppy? Are our entries getting picked off because we're misdroning things? Are we getting flanked because no one is watching flank drones? Are we stalling out on attack because we're not spending time to get that mid and late round intel? So then we just waste like 40 seconds, everybody just standing around staring at angles, waiting for kills to come to us. That's the stuff that has to be talked about in those prep phase, operator phase, all that stuff, right? Especially if you're playing 6-6, where you're playing the same site multiple times. Again, that's the most important. That's why scrims are so important, especially like these 6-6 scrims, is because you get to play the same site twice. If you lose the first round, then you have a chance to make adaptations and fix it. So many times I see teams lose the round, talk about nothing important in their op phase and prep phase, and then they go into the next round and do the same thing and lose again. And then people get frustrated as to why they're not doing well. This again is where we got to use our time. We have to make spend our time quality, right? I can't speak, you know what I mean. But it's not about just like the amount of time that you're spending. It's about how you're using your time, right? That's where we get that quality is. So that's when we're talking about reviews are so important. But we'll move on. So making decisions as a team based on intel, same thing. And that's switching gears needed. Are we going to need to be aggressive here? Or are we going to be passive, right? If we see an opening and we could get an early plant, why not capitalize on that opening? You know what I mean? There's so many there's so many openings in every round possible that if they just got that mid and late round intel, they could have capitalized on that opening. Like we talked about, whether it's territory, whether it's getting a pick, or whether it's getting a plant down, and they always freeze up. They always want more information than what they need. That's where we have to understand, what territory do we need to plant. But we'll get to that in a sec. So, and then one of the other big problems is that in the team specifically that I'm talking about, the entries are also the roamers on that team, and so they spend a lot of time together. But I noticed that they're a little bit off of their coordination isn't very good together. And it's because they're never really on the same page. So, if you're thinking about you guys are entering the building together in many cases, when you're roaming together in many cases. Maybe one of you needs to be like the micro IGL player of these two players. You know what I mean? You still have your IGL who controls the team, but this will be like your micro IGL player of like, he is the entry or the roamer who, is just better at comms, better at communicating, whatever it might be. There's always pluses and strengths to each player. And maybe this specific player needs to step up and control the other guys so that you guys are playing more effectively together, right? If you're going for a flank, are you guys going together? If you're going to do something, do you need him to swing with you from the other side in a pinch? Do you need him to make noise for you while you're coming for this flank. Like, these are the things that you have to think about and micromanage that other player so that you guys are coordinated and making a bigger impact in the game, rather than like having two solo ranked players go around on the roam. Every once in a while get some picks, otherwise they get cleared because they're not playing together, and that's where we get into that consistency thing of where we need our roamers and entries to be consistent, right? Well, we need the whole team to be consistent, but we're just talking about that right now. So let's go back up here real quick. Schedule. This is going to be very important. A lot of T3 teams don't have something like this. This is just a basic schedule that I put together, but it's a 5 days, like 5 days on, 2 days off. So Sunday, for example, is what I would call the admin day, where we do VOD review, we plan for the upcoming week, we do dry runs, and then we can do drills or whatever if we have extra time. And then, me as the coach or analyst, this is my hours of availability after, or around practices on that day, so players can schedule one-on-ones with me or group sessions, whatever, and we can get extra time outside of practices, right? And then the next day, Monday, we have our warm-up before the scrim, which I should put in here review as well, because every day you can review, and that's where, last week we can review something like this, like what kind of issues we ran into last week, so we can think about fixing stuff today, or what do you want to call it? Reviews on, maybe we review a clip of a pro player, a pro round or something, just to talk about like what they did. It could be anything. Review can be anything, but most times we want it to be about our team, right? Next thing, and then so we do our review, and then we go into our scrim of 2 maps, 6-6, right? Whatever maps we're working on this week, or if we have one specific map that we're working on this week, we at least got to get that one right. We scrim 2-2, whatever we dry ran, scrim 6-6, 2 maps, and then afterwards we need to spend a good solid 15 to 30 minutes as a team going over an after action review, right? So it doesn't matter if you have a coach, an analyst, or you're just a team by yourself. You should do this after action review, after your scrims. No one needs to be angry. No one needs to be upset. There needs to be no bullshit, because again, we're here to learn. We're here to get better. That's always one of the biggest problems, is attitude. People being angry. I can't understand why. But this is a learning. It's just a long progress, or like process of learning, right? That's what we have to like understand, is that everybody talks about this game as a grinding game, and it is a grinding game because you have to. A lot of people aren't spending their time correctly. They don't have that discipline. They don't have that direction. You know what I mean? If you spend your time like just focus on the tasks at hand, then you're going to be more successful at a faster pace than if you're just like going through the process, right? So anyway, so we scrim, we did our AAR. This is where in our AAR, after action review, that we make something like this based on what happened in today's game. And then when we go into tomorrow, we review this list, talk about what happened yesterday, 15 to 30 minutes prior to the game. That way we can warm up as well. Obviously, this is for a team with less time. If you have more time, then maybe you warm up longer. Who knows? Whatever. And then next day we come in, review, warm up, and then we do our game day. This is just this schedule. Game day can be everywhere, and that's where we put our learning to the test, right? We've spent 3 days in a row where we've reviewed, we've dry ran, we've warmed up, we've tested things, we've talked about things. Now we're coming in, whether it's just a scrim game day or it's a league game day, and we're coming in serious, putting everything we learned, to the test, and making sure that we're performing at peak standards, or what we want, right? That's where that expectations thing comes into play, is like, what do we want as a team, all that good stuff. All right, then they have their day off, and so anyway, you get the point here. The purple is like what available, like hours I would be available outside of practices, like I said, for people to meet on, all that good stuff. So then we go over here. This could be something that we do in a review, right? Reviews can be anything. They can be a round that we played recently. It can be an overall list like this. We could go over, like I said, something like this, for example. It could be whatever. So when we see this is a VOD that I did recently of a Challenger game. Thatcher was open this game. We talked about all that stuff. I'm just gonna make this real quick. But they opened up jacuzzi wall. They didn't do the pinch. They're just doing a master side take, trying to get control of the box here and plant probably Jim is what we assume, right? So what do we need to do this, right? If Thatcher is open, we probably play Thatcher. And we know they already won the other 2 rounds. We don't need a sledge. We swap the sledge out for Thatcher because, again, what the heck do we need sledge for in this site? So then we have to think about what territory do we need to plant if we're planting in Jim here. We box this off. So this is a good mental note in our head is like, okay, this is what we need if we're doing this take. And we can plant in here, right? So what do we need to do to take this? Bathroom isn't necessary, but it adds a huge boost to your success, right? If you're going to be successful, getting this guy out of bathroom is a huge play, especially if you have someone on highway here who can pick them off. So then we have to think about if we're going to be playing this and we're not taking the other side over here, we probably need like ace or thermite to open up at least this wall and have someone sit over here to watch this window so that our guys on highway here don't get picked by the window, right? So that's a step that we have to think about. So if we're going through review, maybe that's something that we didn't do last time is like, we didn't open the plat wall. They swung on us on CC window and we got picked. Okay, that's our review. What can we do? And that's where we come in here in our review time and we talk about what could we do better. Something that happened in this round, for example, as well, is that there was a Wamai in the bathroom. I can't remember if he had two. I want to say he had 2 ADS, but it could have been 3. And he was available to impact this wall, right? And he had his Wamai disc. So what is something that we can do to deal with that, right? We have an ace on the board, and hopefully we should have a Thatcher, right? Because he's available in this case. So we don't know who's doing what here, but we know that we need to get this wall open. So maybe we have intel on it, maybe we don't. How do we open this wall? If we have Thatcher, we can throw Thatcher at the wall, disable all the dis and ADS here, we flash just in case, and then we start nading in here. And while we're nading, this is where coordination comes into play, talking about it. While we're nading this guy in here and forcing him to like run out or reposition himself, that's when the ace is throwing a double Selma on the wall, right? And because at that time, if we're nading him, he's going to have to run around, maybe run out of the room, expose himself, we get the pick from the window, whatever. And that's going to, or I think in this case, he sat in this spot too. So maybe we throw a deep nade and we throw another nade here, make him force him out. And that's when we throw our Selmas, right? That's some teamwork. We talked about it. We have a plan. So when we see this, for example, this round that we covered already in the VOD review, after the game, in our after action review or our review for the next day, whatever it might be, this is a round that we might specifically talk about is like, how do we deal with this guy in bathroom, right? So this is the type of stuff we have to think about. We have to talk about it as a team. That's where the reviews come into play. You really have to come to each day trying to improve, and that's where those daily and weekly goals come into play. Again, like we do our review, and what was yesterday's problem? Like, maybe, like we talked about, maybe it's droning. So we need to fix our droning today. Like as we come in, we need to really spend our time today creating good habits and forcing ourselves to drone. And that's where you have to create those good habits. You have to talk about them as a team. It's just like creating habits in life. If you are a night owl, you're not going to suddenly just start waking up every day at 6 a.m. and going to the gym. It's going to take consistent daily, like, commitment to accomplishing that, right? So every day when we come into practice, let's say that our weekly goal is working on communications, like our comms, like what we're talking about, what we're doing. Then every day we need to come in, and every scrim we need to be focused on like having as good of comms as possible, what we're doing, what we're holding, what the plan is. Everybody's on the same page. Timestamp. You know what I mean? Like you have to come in every day and work on this stuff. So I'm going to leave it there because I'm trying to get better at not, harping on things and repeating things a lot. I pretty much talked about everything I wanted to talk about here. Hopefully this helps some people. because you really need to start thinking about this stuff, talking about this stuff as a team, have a schedule so that you can become more consistent at things, especially with the reviews. That way, when you go into your scrims or your game day, you're on task, you're on focus, you know what we need to work on, what our problems were yesterday, and fix those problems today, right? So thank you for your time. Hopefully this helps some people. Enjoy your day.